It's an original review for an original guy. Let's talk about Marty Supreme.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, we're here to discuss Marty Supreme. But before we get into that, Daniel, do you want to let the people know what you've been watching and why they should watch it?
So I've been watching season 8 of Rick and Morty, which came out, I think, a week or two ago, and I kind of just binged it in, I think 2 sittings. That show continues to be excellent, one of the most creative sci-fi comedies, I think, being made right now. I think that show, it kind of has gotten a bad rap because like 6 or 7 years ago, a bunch of its fans kind of got carried away with some stunts on the internet. But I think once you look at what that show is actually doing, I think it's really smart existential satire. And one of the things I appreciate about it is not just that the quality is consistently high, but also that it manages to surprise you. Like whenever you turn on a new episode, it could be anything. And they really make good use of the sci-fi conceit. There's a surprising amount of continuity between episodes and between seasons. So 8, like if you've not been watching the show, 8 seasons in, like half the characters are clones or from alternate dimensions, or like it gets weird quite quickly. And it manages to be actually quite existential and thoughtful. And it does one thing, like I call this middlebrow, where half of a show is really lowbrow and crude, and the other half is really elevated and thoughtful. And I always like it when those two come together, and Rick and Morty does it in not in every episode, but in a lot of episodes. I would just highly recommend it if you like that kind of thing. It's also mellowed out quite a bit. It's not nearly as crass and as juvenile. So if you maybe tried out the early seasons years ago and thought it was a little bit much, I think it might be more to your taste now, because everybody's like 10 years older than when they started, and they've kind of gotten a lot of things out of their system. But what's left is still quite smart sci-fi comedy, which I enjoy quite a bit every 3 or 4 years when a new season comes out.
I will never forget the first time I watched Rick and Morty. I was in uni, I was high, and like my friends introduced it to me. And it's funny that you said about like the lowbrow and like the kind of high elevated jokes that were in there as well. I just remember being like extremely high and just, I don't know, just like looking at this on such a like deep level of like what was being presented to me. And this was like the first time I watched it. I was like, oh my God, they're like, saying this and this and the other and whatever. And I can't remember it, or can't remember it now, and I can't remember what my thought patterns were. But I just remember it just being so wacky and so crazy, but trying to like understand some of the high concepts behind it or whatever like that. And for the most part, it's probably because I was just high. But no, Rick and Morty is one that I kind of fell off of actually as well, but one that I definitely enjoyed while I was in some of the Rick and Morty craze, and one that I probably wouldn't mind revisiting as well, because I do like putting on some of these animated stuff in the background while doing stuff. So yeah, I think now that I know that there's a new season, I think worth checking out, and I probably will check that out.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy the Easter episode, and that's all I say about that. I think the 3rd episode in the season or something like that. I think there's 3 levels to enjoying Rick and Morty, and it sounds like you got to the 2nd level, which sounds maybe a little bit conceited. But so the first level is, oh, this is just raunchy, offensive comedy. And I think a lot of people kind of bounce off the show at that point. And then the second level is, oh, this is like Rick is the hero of the story, and it's kind of this transgressive, screw everybody, screw the system kind of thing. And kind of that's where you get a lot of the like a lot of the memes and a lot of the quotes from. And there's like a third level where you kind of begin to see kind of the existential satire, where it actually gets quite sincere and quite emotional. And that's where you realize that Rick is not the hero, Morty is. And it's just a story about finding meaning in a meaningless universe. A lot of episodes ultimately come down to that. I think a lot of people don't get to that point, and they don't appreciate kind of what the show actually does a lot of the time. And there's plenty of crude jokes and offensive and transgressive humor in there. But I think the real appeal to me is when like the humanity shines through, and especially when somebody pushes through Rick's nonsense and kind of actually finds meaning where you would least expect it. And that's where I appreciate the show. And then I also like the high concept ideas, and the like just taking a weird premise to its ultimate conclusion and beyond. The pacing of it, how much story and how many ideas they pack into 22 minutes of an episode, and how far they will push a premise, even when you see the beginning of an episode and you kind of see the setup, you have no idea where this is going to go. And I think that's the joy of a new season of that show to me, is where like I go in completely without spoilers. I just turn it on and just watch it and I just let it run. And I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea where this will lead us. Not every episode lands completely, but on average, their hit rate I think is quite high. So I do think, like, for all its hype and for all its like all the discussion around it, I think a lot of people don't really give the show a fair shake, and that's kind of why I wanted to mention it, because like even after 8 seasons, I think it still got it, and I think it's a good watch.
Well, with that, I think I wouldn't say my recommendation. It's not really a recommendation. I'm going to be the one to bring up Stranger Things season 5, the finale, just because we're not doing a dedicated video about it, but it's like the most recent thing I watched. I think it's like, hot topic on the internet at the moment, and I think for the most part, everyone is like trashing it. And I actually think they're kind of going too far where they're like really picking holes at absolutely everything with the show. Whilst I do kind of some agree in that there's probably things that they forgot about, or the whole meme at the moment of Vecna being killed and the Demogorgons sort of taking selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower and stuff like that. I think are hilarious. I do think that the finale episode itself was enjoyable whilst not being perfect. I think people had issues with like the Mind Flayer being like a big kaiju at the end of it, and I didn't kind of see it and have an issue with it or mind it too much. I was like, okay, that's cool, but I do agree that the final fight was maybe over with a little bit too quickly. I remember getting to the end of that and doing what everyone else did, clicking on the button and seeing how long I had left, and realizing there was still about an hour left of the episode where they wanted to do the longest epilogue of all time. For the most part, I actually kind of just fast forwarded through some of those scenes, because by that point, like I said at the start of the season, is that I kind of fell out of love with the characters and I didn't really care too much. And actually through the final season, it didn't really recapture that magic that it had for the original characters. So this big send off that they had, I didn't really care too much. Apart from actually the final scene, I think they did that really well, where they kind of go up and play D&D one last time, and then you kind of have the new kids come over and go like rush down and kind of start off their D&D campaign, which I thought was like a nice touch to end the season. But I think kind of long-winded to say, whilst I understand everyone's like kind of frustrations and everyone kind of picking holes at the Stranger Things finale, I don't think it's as bad as what everyone is saying. But I do recognize that there was a lot of holes in this season. It's like the writers kind of forgot the world that they set up, and they kind of forgot that they, implemented specific stuff in the universe. It's a lesser show for that. And it's just kind of unfortunate with some of these series where it kind of runs for too long or overstays its welcome, kind of runs out of ideas, starts spinning the wheels, maybe does a bit too much on the sort of character melodrama stuff, where this kind of show stops so that people can have like conversations about feelings and stuff like that. And it just doesn't make for great watching overall. But I don't know. It was just like a satisfying, okay, it's come to an end. It's definitely not a Game of Thrones season 8 by any long stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, it could have been so much better. So yeah, not a recommendation, more disappointment, but somewhat satisfied at the same time. I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place with the finale, but won't ever revisit Stranger Things again after this point.
So I watched it basically for completeness. I was really into it in season 1, like it was 9 years ago. I kind of rewatched season 4 and then 5 when it came out, and I was just really underwhelmed because it seemed like there were just no ideas. I was not invested at all in the story. I kind of just like the story. I like the 80s aesthetic. I like the Stephen King pastiche aspect of it. I think the D&D like shtick kind of overstayed its welcome, and especially once you had these 40-year-old teenagers, it didn't quite work out. Like it did not quite ring true anymore. It didn't quite have the charm it did. I think they really showed to have produced those 5 seasons in maybe 6 years or something like that. The passage of time, I think, kind of really hurt them. But beyond anything else, that and in the end didn't seem to be much of a point. And the story itself is not that complicated. Like I think pretty much every season of this could have been a movie, maybe a 2.5-hour movie or something like that. Like when you actually lay out what happened in season 5, it's not that much. And the villain's plan is not that complex, and the resolution is not that interesting. I think if this was a movie, I would have said, yeah, this is nice, but where's the big idea? And I think the big, like, you favorably compared it to Game of Thrones, and I don't think it's quite as much of a dumpster fire as that, but it is a similar problem where they didn't have a plan. Where it looks to me like when season one was such a massive success and season two was greenlit, they didn't sit down and mapped out all 5 seasons. Said, okay, this is kind of the big thing that it's all working towards, and we're going to really structure this really meticulously and really carefully. And in the end, it kind of comes down to they kind of fight the villain and win, and then they go home.
If you let the writers tell it, they will tell you that this was their plan from the very beginning. And I don't know why they like to do it. I don't know why they like to claim that they had this like thing mapped out when it's very obvious as a viewer watching it that the pieces don't add up to, the finale that we had. It wasn't your grand plan for us to end up where we ended up. So it's just a bit insulting when sort of they kind of go out on interviews and say that it was planned out when it clearly wasn't. And it's quite funny actually when they're having to come out like a few days after the finale airs, and they are having to like explain certain things in there and explain why like things were missing and stuff like that. And it's just like kind of clearly shows that you didn't really think it through, and now you're trying to like fill the gaps through interviews, and it's just like you should have put this on the screen for us to see.
Yet I'm not invested enough to really dissect it and really scrutinize it. It's more like I was bored watching it because I didn't see the big idea. I didn't see the cool factor other than it looks pretty. Like even the effects are like a lot of it shot in the real world looks quite nice. But once people are just standing in front of a green screen, it's not impressive. And like the way the villain is defeated and the big reveal about what the upside down is and all of that, not all that involved, not all that interesting. So I was just underwhelmed. And it's like if you have a decade to figure this out, can you do better? Like they did not have to rush this at all. Like if any showrunner could make a show kind of with essentially unlimited budget, unlimited time, unlimited resources, unlimited talent, like in terms of who they could draw on, it's these guys, and that's what they make with it. Like that's the part where I'm a little bit upset at all. Like I said, like my bottom line is season one is a cool show, and season 2 to 5 is kind of an encore. Like if you just like the vibes and if you like these characters, there's more stuff, but the story is season one.
I guess with that, somewhat of a eulogy on Stranger Things chapter 5 or season 5, we should probably move on to Marty Supreme. So Danny G, do you want to give the people a synopsis of Marty Supreme as best as you can?
So Marty Supreme is a drama movie that follows the story of Marty Mauser, who is a table tennis player out of New York, who is one of the few Americans participating in competitive ping pong in the 1950s. And when he loses to a Japanese player in the big finals, he goes on a mission to try again in the next tournament. And in order to do that, he has to earn a bunch of money. The story essentially follows his odyssey as he fights against the entire world who is trying to undermine him. At least that's how he sees it in his quest to win that table tennis tournament. And we kind of follow him and the people in his life as he pursues that goal against all odds. So what did we think of Marty Supreme?
This was fantastic. This movie is kind of like Marmite. It seems like people either love it or hate it, and even the people having to go watch it with polarizing experiences with the movie. But I thought it was fascinating. I think big shout out to Timothée Chalamet. I think he gave a really captivating performance, and I think without him, this is a much lesser movie than what it turned out to be. I think he was like, really engaging throughout the whole movie. Really kind of carried every scene, and that kind of goes with all the other supporting cast that was in this as well. You kind of really came out of it thinking, yeah, they kind of acted their asses off on this. I think I was like through like parts of it, I was a little bit lost as to like what the movie like wanted to be throughout, but then kind of once I understood it and once I saw what they were going for, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And I was then kind of thrilled to be along the ride of someone that is unforgiving and relentless about pursuing their goals and pursuing sort of what they seem to be as like their life's work. It was just like so entertaining throughout, and I'm trying to find like the best way to kind of summarize that, because a lot of it is, I wouldn't say disjointed, but a lot of it is he's doing this the one thing over here, and then he's trying something else over here, and then he kind of goes up and does something else over there. It's almost like a bit of a thrill ride, and I don't think it ever slows down for me at any point. Like I was on a high for most of the movie, and I think what I appreciate as well is that it doesn't kind of like preach to you as to like what's right or wrong. It's kind of almost up for interpretation as to sort of how you view his character, how you sort of perceive who he was and what he was like. And I think there are elements in there where, he's kind of shown to be a certain way, but, it doesn't outright tell you that this is a bad person. And, you should just like this person. It's kind of up to you to really just kind of see and kind of make your own, decisions based off of who he is, what he wanted, and, what it means for or what he has to do to kind of achieve that. Ultimately, great movie for me. I think really captivating performances. It's kind of like the standout of this movie is what I say. It's just like the captivating performances. Actually, very funny in so many places as well. But yeah, hand over to you.
So I did not walk into this expecting very much. It's like it seemed to be like a biopic about this eccentric table tennis player from the 50s who I'd never heard of. Like I didn't really get the hook.
For the record, for the people, Daniel didn't want to do this movie, so I'm very curious to know what his opinion is.
Yeah, so like the summaries of it didn't sound all that captivating, and then I watched it, and very quickly I began to realize that this is not really a biopic. It's loosely inspired by the life of this New York table tennis player, but it's not trying to be his real story. It's more taking that as a jumping off point to tell this off the wall story about one man's quest to tell the world to screw itself and to prevail against all odds. Like on a technical level, I think it's fantastic. The acting, how it's shot, all of it, like how it's structured, the pacing of it, it's just a really well made movie, and it deserves props for that. Even if I didn't care for the story, but I cared for the story. I cared for Marty and all his nonsense. I cared for the different characters. I cared for the setting. I cared for kind of the outcome of the tournament and all of that. So I think this is just really well made, like a really good drama. There's a few things I like about this. One of them is that Marty is not a hero. He's not a good person. He's just a person. The movie does not require you to like him. You can just be fascinated by his story. And that's kind of the appeal, to the point of him being told how full of shit he is by multiple people throughout the movie. And he just pushes through it. A lot of his problems are self-caused and self-inflicted. And a lot of his solutions kind of come from other people, and he doesn't really appreciate it. But he's just pure stubbornness, and he just pushes through all adversity. I like it when a movie kind of transcends just simplistic good and evil, or likable or not likable, and just shows us people doing things, and it makes sense why they do it, and they end up in interesting situations because of that. I do think the movie is too long. We could have easily cut 4 or 5 instances of the world trying to screw over Marty, especially in the middle. It kind of repeats it's not like the sequences are too long or boring. It's more like once you get into the middle part of it, it's like we've seen like already 15 people not appreciate Marty and try to screw him over and try to keep him from achieving his goal. And examples 16, 17, and 18 are maybe a little bit redundant, and I think you could have easily cut half an hour from this, and it still would have made its point. It still would have had its impact. I think it has one ending too many, and I'm not sure that the second ending is all that great, but we'll talk about that. But overall, I'm glad I watched it.
Let's talk about it. Is what you meant to say?
Yeah, you're taking the words out of my mouth. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Good. Okay, good. I'm surprised you liked it, but I'm glad you liked it. Where do you want to start with this? We can kind of, but yeah, I mean, do you want to start on Timothée Chalamet? Because I think, we both highlighted how strong performance that there was in this particular movie.
He really just holds this together, right? Like it's his pure presence and spite, and he goes a lot, like he's kind of Hollywood's pretty boy at the moment, right? And for him to play such an unattractive and unlikable character, I think is gutsy. It seems to me like this is something you would play in your 40s once you've made your money. I don't know that this will hurt him, but it's not an intuitive move, right? That's kind of impressive on its own, and then you read about all the effort that went into making this movie and then promoting the movie, and I can just have a lot of respect for the people involved in this. Because when we deal with Hollywood movies, like there's so much bullshit and so much pretension. If you've listened to a few of our episodes, so many times I kind of go into this road complaint of, oh, this is just Hollywood nonsense. It's like taking itself way too seriously. It doesn't deliver on what it pretends to be about. And I think this movie just has no pretension in it at all. I don't think. Like there's some stuff here about kind of the method acting stuff, and about getting, like it's not really method acting. I think they even make fun of method acting at one point. But this whole thing about how he wore glasses with the right prescription so that his eyes would look authentic on camera, that's just crazy. Like it does not improve the story at all, but it shows that they cared. You know what? Like they tried to get it right, and they tried to have a certain effect on the viewer. And I think that's an example where it probably goes unnoticed, and it's kind of wasted effort. But like everything from the costumes to how people talk to how the backgrounds of it, to the historical details and all of it, I just like it when a movie tries, and I like it when filmmakers care, and they care about telling a story like this and don't just want to be applauded for it. In the, you know what I mean? Like this movie, like it actually delivers on what it wants to do first.
That's why it's like interesting to have Timothy C as sort of Marty in this particular movie. And I know you're not one for award shows, neither am I. But I don't know if you ever caught his like famous speech that he did recently at a recent award show about kind of like his pursuit for greatness and trying to be one of the greats, and following the paths of some that had come before, and like kind of like this like relentless pursuit. And it's almost like he kind of like mirrored Marty in sort of in real life. So it was quite interesting to kind of see that, but then play out.
I was going to ask, did he do this speech in character as Marty? Because that's something Marty would say, right?
Yeah, no. So this wasn't in as Marty. I think this was like maybe like a year or two ago now. I can't remember exactly when he had the speech. So this was like before the movie even like came out. But I think it's like the small details that you're picking out there, that is coming from someone that is passionate about making great, not just making sort of good movies, but making great movies and being the best at their craft, and doing whatever it takes to make the best movie. And you can, like you say, you can feel it and you can see it come through in this particular movie. Like I didn't pick up on the glasses stuff, and I'm sort of not a user. I wouldn't. It's not stuff that I would normally pick out, but the setting felt real, even when even when it didn't necessarily need to. It just kind of felt real. I felt like I was transported into the 1950s, especially when he's kind of like in and out of some of the shops, when he's kind of going into where the pregnant woman was working, and when he's like kind of running through the carts and stuff like that, or like dealing with the policeman, and just like that complete sequence, you kind of really feel like you're in there. And I just felt like they just kind of did a really good job of making you feel immersed in the world, and making you immersed in the movie as a whole.
The main goal was realizing this world, making it feel real and lived in, and kind of creating this sense that this is the world these characters inhabit. And I don't know that it like broke any boundaries, like it achieved something no other movie has ever done. It just really succeeds at doing that, right? It doesn't feel plastic. There's no obvious CGI backgrounds. It feels like it was shot there, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in like different movies about actually caring about your craft, and putting going in sort of the extra mile. Or a lot of the time when we complain about like so movies, a lot of the time it's like the small details. It's like why didn't you think of that, or like why didn't you, like, it didn't take too much effort to sort of kind of add that little bit extra to sort of elevate the movie a little bit more. And this movie just does all of that, and does all of that really well. And like you said, nothing about this is groundbreaking. The story's a little bit unconventional as well. And like you said, there probably is maybe one or two extra examples in there of like the world being against Marty, but because everything is so great, I don't mind it. Like, again, anytime I'm enjoying a movie, I know people complain about like long movies, but if I'm enjoying something and I'm immersed in the world and I'm like really like living in it, I don't want to be pulled out. So whilst there probably was a long middle part, because everything around it is so great, I don't mind it. Like, give me more.
I did feel in the middle where I was feeling a little bit bored. Like I've seen this now 10 times. Like there's a bunch of really great sequences kind of in the beginning and in the end. And in the middle, there's a lot of stuff where it kind of repeats itself and kind of spins its wheels a little bit. And it's all it's all a step in Marty's journey, right? But I think you could have constructed this journey with a few fewer steps, right? And if I feel like a movie is just repeating itself and not adding anything new or adding any new wrinkles, or is even all that impressive, then I have to ask why are we spending time on this, right? So for instance, like in the beginning, this whole thing where he just shows up at this tournament and just demands a better room, and has like he just has this whole performance for the journalists when they're interviewing him and stuff like that, right? Like it's like those are memorable scenes that you can quote and that will stick out and that way you will recognize when you see them in clips and whatever. And there's a bunch of stuff in the middle where did we really need the whole thing about the dog, for instance? Like what does it add? For example,
I thought it came back around quite well. In fact, the whole sort of sequence with the dogs again, because he had that scene when he was talking to his pregnant girl that he was with, where he kind of like almost says, "This is a culmination of the choices that you've made in your life," kind of dismissing sort of saying that she had kind of real like no purpose and something like that, and wasn't accountable for her actions and where her actions led her. It felt like, especially with that dog one, was these are things that happened earlier in the movie and you can kind of quickly forget about, but it's kind of like it comes full circle, and it's almost like you almost missed your big opportunity because you was a dick in the situation, or you kind of thought about yourself and you didn't do the right thing, or you should have done something but you didn't, and this is what almost cost you your opportunity, or kind of contributed to costing you the actual great goal that you had of actually competing in the tournament. But the consolation prize was actually, to be fair, at that point he actually thought he was going to compete at this on the tournament when he was getting on that flight. But it was just kind of like, the way I saw it was like almost like a parallel, or like a connection between him accusing her of like not making the right choices in life, and then that almost coming back to bite him in the bum.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's the part with Rachel, right? I'm just not sure that the story would suffer if you cut out the stuff with the dog, because it kind of starts because of a coincidence, right? It's a coincidence that he's in that hotel where that rich guy with the dog is, and he breaks through the ceiling and injures the guy and is not responsible for the dog, and then the dog runs away, and then somebody steals the dog, and then he tries to scam the owner by getting him the dog back, but he doesn't really have the dog. And I think it's definitely not an essential part of the story, and I'm not too sure what it adds that other pieces also don't add, if that makes sense.
Again, you're kind of speaking to someone that loved the movie, so I probably wouldn't cut much from it, to be honest. I can maybe like hear it from your perspective, because like he also has like the experiences with his friend and with the rich billionaire who sells pens, etc., which kind of is teaching similar lessons as well. But especially because that heavily involved Rachel as well, and like she was like such a big part of that as well. It just felt like it just like connected quite well in terms of like her experience and like what he said to her, and like how he viewed her, and then how that then connected back to the silly choices that he was making.
It was just more engrossed by all the stuff in the beginning with his family, and then the thing about hustling people at ping pong to make money and getting into trouble over it, his whole conflict with the table tennis authorities, and his romance with this movie star who, on the one hand, is his big opportunity and helps him out, but also has the life experience to show him how full of shit he is. And he tries to steal from her, and she finds out, and she knows exactly what he's doing, and she then ends up helping him anyway because she's so wealthy it doesn't matter to her that he tried to steal from her, and all of this, right? The highs are much higher, I thought, in the other parts, and so I wasn't sure why so much time was spent on this other thing. Like I do like the whole thing about he just has to hustle his way to paying off that fine in some way, right? And I'm not saying cut maybe all of it. It's more like it's a bit much at places. But the thing is, I'm into this too, right? There's lots of places where I was really into it, and then there's like some parts in the middle where I say, oh, maybe I would have been more into it if that was cut and we were focusing on some more interesting parts. That's just what I'm saying.
I think I can agree that probably the other parts were like stronger, but I don't know. I actually found it quite fascinating. I actually found it fascinating in the sense as well that his impact on the people around him as well, in terms of how Rachel's behavior started to kind of change and sort of be influenced by how he was treating her, and like how he was manipulating her and stuff like that, and like him not being able to recognize that she was kind of playing him with the black eye and stuff like that, and then like how she was then trying to learn off of him because she was in like a tough situation. So instead of kind of going back home to her husband, she was then using the tricks that she'd learned from Marty in this movie to try and hustle and try to make money on her own, coming up with her own schemes and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know. I found it all interesting on various different levels, I'd say.
Yeah, I liked Rachel quite a bit, and I'm not sure that this was Marty's influence on her. I think they're both a product of the same environment. And he says at various places, like, this is just how you do things where he's from. Like, you just hustle and you scam and you push until you get what you want, because nobody's going to give it to you, and nobody's going to give you what you're owed. A lot of Marty's problems are self-inflicted. And one of those things is, as I was watching the movie, I was kind of wondering, okay, why doesn't he just quit his job at his family shoe store and just teach ping pong for a year until he's saved up the money, maybe get a roommate or something? Maybe he doesn't make it to next year's tournament, but the year after or something, right? His insistence to compete at the next tournament, and that means he has to cut a lot of corners, and that means he has to get this money in any way he can. It definitely flows from his personality and flows from his need to not not take a second best option and always get what he wants, right? And he will just do whatever it takes to achieve that. So that all makes sense, right? That's part of the movie, that a lot of his problems are self-inflicted. I don't even think the ping pong association scams him out of anything or treats him poorly, right? He has two run-ins with this table tennis association guy, right? The first one is when he shows up at the first tournament and just starts making random demands. He keeps making a nuisance of himself until they give him what he wants. Like, he's not actually entitled to the nicer room, right? He just keeps pushing until he gets what he wants. And then the second one is, it seemed to be correct to me that he paid off his fine too late, right? That he can't expect to be admitted into the tournament 2 weeks before or a week before it happens, because that probably means kicking out somebody else and redoing all the scheduling and all of that, right? There was probably a deadline that he missed, and he missed it because he was so consumed by his quest to get to the finish line. So I'm not actually sure that they actually did anything wrong, but there was still kind of an obstacle to him. And the fact that the movie kind of knows the difference between those two, I think, is really refreshing.
I was just kind of saying about like a lot of the things, but I think you've kind of already touched on it. Is a lot of the issues that he has is very much self-inflicted, and almost that entitlement and demanding that life kind of bends to him because he is going to be so great one day, and like everyone will be so grateful for it. And he's like almost like always trying to cash in checks before they've even landed with people, where he's like always trying to borrow on what he currently doesn't have, just based on his skill and based on his reputation and stuff like that, which is, like you said, fascinating. Not something that they always kind of do and like do well and like balance well, but I think they find the right level of it in this movie.
And there definitely are real challenges that he faces where people are actually trying to sabotage him, right? His family in the beginning is just completely awful. Like, they just want him to fail so that he stays in the family business and does what they think is right for him. And Rockwell definitely screws him over in the end.
Would you say that his family does him over? Especially like if you kind of consider the context of like 1950, where, ping pong or like table tennis isn't, one of the major sports like, tennis or football was at the time. And it's like, especially where he doesn't have that much money or doesn't have that, that much financial strength behind him, is they're probably just looking at him like, we know you're trying to chase the dream, but here's a stable business. Like, your uncle's got you this job, you're even good at it as well. And he's like trying to promote you to be a manager. So I wouldn't say they were even trying to hold him back from being great. It was just like, they probably didn't see the same vision that he had. And I think he kind of feels it in the movie where he's kind of like being held back, or like, they're trying to like dim his light, and he thinks like his light's going to be, be one of the brightest. I don't know. I didn't feel like his family did him that wrong in this movie. I don't think I really got why she was trying to call him sick.
That was to waste his time. So like so it would be one thing if they simply thought he would be better off selling shoes in the family business, right? But they actually take steps to undermine him and sabotage him. For example, when his uncle just won't give him his money that he's owed, knowing that he can't buy the plane tickets without it. And he basically has to extract it at gunpoint. I don't think there's anything in the movie that suggests that he's not in fact owed those $700. And then his mom pretends to be sick so that he spends time there rather than, organize his trip, when his uncle kind of pays this local cop to shake him down, to make it seem like he's in trouble, to intimidate him into falling in line. That's way over the line. Like, they're like at every point they're trying to undermine him, and they're not simply trying to convince him that he's going down the wrong path. They're actually sabotaging him in ways that are completely unreasonable. He is an adult who is owed money, right? It's his money. They're not giving it to him, and they're kind of guilting him into doing things he doesn't want to do and that are designed to make him miss those deadlines, right? And so he has to just go against his family. It definitely creates permanent rifts between him and his family. So I think there's kind of the first big instance where it is him against the world, right? Because the people who are supposed to help him, who are supposed to want the best for him, are actively trying to sabotage him.
Yeah, I think I forgot about that whole instance of him having to like forcefully get his money. But actually what I did like as well in this movie is that, for the most part, you can almost perceive him to be like an asshole and like, just like using people and stuff like that. But actually beneath that, there was like a level of care that he had for the people around him. Like, for example, when he thinks that Rachel's husband has physically abused her, he goes out and like exacts revenge, and he doesn't even take it too far. He doesn't like completely like beat on him. He just kind of like hits him one time and tells him that's wrong, what he did. He also does his best to actually look out for Rachel throughout the movie when he like thinks that she's pregnant, and then when he actually realizes that, you know, she's kind of like faking the injury or whatever like that, he just literally says to her like, there isn't a life with me, like there's no settling down over here. Whatever like you're picturing isn't going to be here. Just go home to your husband, basically. Like go do the right, just like go and be sorry to your husband. So, you know, he does have some type of humanity to him and like a level of care for the people and stuff like that around him, which I think I appreciate the movie sprinkling in just to have some type of balance to the character.
And it makes sense, right? You can see, you can look at his environment and see how he learned the lesson over and over again, that nobody's going to help him, and in order to get what he is owed, he has to take it. Like even when he's hustling, like in the ping pong hall, they will just not respect the rules. They will just not honor his winnings. His opponent just walks away from a game without conceding. Like everything is really unfair. And you're absolutely right that deep down there's a decent person in there, but he's a good person who has learned that he has to be selfish, and he is at peace with that, and he will do what he needs to achieve what he thinks is his, but he still wants to achieve it, right? He doesn't, like, he steals, right? But it's all in the purpose of, so like he doesn't cheat at the final game, right? When he beats the Japanese player, right? That's I think that's very telling, and he keeps insisting that things be fair, and people keep ignoring him, right? Like he's very quick to blame other people, but he's generally not full of shit when it comes to this. Right? Like one of the things was in the initial tournament, that is a very structured, very fair environment, right? Or it's supposed to be, right? Like if you've ever played in any kind of tournament setting for anything, it's very regimented, and all the rules are there to create predictable situations, and they really punish people trying to play fast and loose with the rules, and all the rules are there to create a fair competition as much as is possible, right? This very selfish, very impulsive guy goes into this very structured environment who kind of has learned the lesson that life is just unfair and people are out to get you. And then he fails, and he just can't, like, I think at that point he can't really handle the fact that he just lost, and he just keeps looking for reasons for who screwed him this time. And at least from memory, I don't think in the initial tournament he's actually cheated out of anything, right? Or am I misremembering?
No, I think the only thing, and again, it kind of speaks to, you know, what you're talking about, like the fairness and stuff like that, was the Japanese guy wasn't meant to be there because of like a travel ban, but then they like made some like exceptional rules for him to travel there, so he didn't anticipate that.
Was that really the case? Or doesn't he say in the beginning, like, this is huge in Japan, and that is why there's a lot of money in this? Like, it's not a surprise to him that the Japanese player is there, right? Part of why he loses is because he's not used to playing against Japanese players. And in Asia, they have a very specific way of playing ping pong, like even to the point of how they hold the bats, right? The paddles. I actually grew up in China, and I learned from Chinese ping pong players how to play because it was like offered at school, right? And it's a completely different way of playing. How you hold the paddle, how like the maneuvers and the techniques, it's completely different. So if you're not used to it, you're gonna have a hard time playing against that. And so he play. There's actually a point that they make where his friend actually plays like the grandmasters, and he practices how to beat all the established players, but they can't do that for the Japanese players because they're not in the same ecosystem. And like you're saying, they're making an exception to admit the Japanese players to this tournament, and that is how he runs up against an opponent that he hasn't studied, and that is why he loses. But that's not the tournament cheating. I don't think that's to anybody's surprise. It's just a random factor that he couldn't control, and that's why he loses. And then in the end, he has learned how to play against that opponent. I think it's when in the rematch, when Koto, I think he scores like 5 points in a row because Marty has not had opportunity to practice against his techniques. And then afterwards he catches up, right? I think that reinforces this idea that this is just like Marty is really street smart, right? He really knows who he's dealing with. He knows what people's weaknesses are. And Koto is the one person who he has to beat fairly. And then I think that is why he respects him so much towards the end. And that is why Koto is the only person who's not trying to screw him in that final sequence. Marty comes from an environment in which he has internalized this sense of unfairness. And so at least initially, he can't handle it when he loses fairly. And his big journey is that he wins fairly in the end, even though nobody wants him to. I think that's the part that's really cool about this.
And like you said, it kind of just speaks to his determination and his willpower to kind of be the best and just realize his ultimate goal. And he kind of like realizes that his dream of like competing in the championship isn't going to happen again. Like you said, like he's being screwed by. He's, I mean, on that part, like you said, he's not really being screwed because like you're not really going to be at the admit 2 weeks before, but they're still kind of rooting against him just because of like who he is and like what kind of character he is. They kind of want to see him fail.
Ram is the guy who represents the Table Tennis Association, right? And I think what's interesting is like this whole theme of fairness, right? And Rockwell just outright is a scumbag, is a con artist who's just using Marty. Ram dislikes Marty because of how he entitled he is and how he doesn't have the right decorum. He's not the right kind of person like that Ram wants in the sport. But I think he kind of screws over Marty. Like it's kind of an expression of Marty's personal failings that he didn't anticipate this, right? That he didn't look up, okay, by when do I need to pay off the fine so that I can register and qualify for the tournament? He just expected if he keeps pushing, he will make it. And that's all that matters. Like maybe, like now that I'm thinking about this, maybe it happens this way because he doesn't expect Ram to play fair. Like, and so Marty thinks he doesn't have to either. And so he's surprised when Ram just pulls out the rule book and says, sorry, you missed the deadline. Nothing I can do. And I'm glad you failed. Try again next year, but I hope you don't. I think it's a different kind of antagonist than Rockwell, for instance.
I didn't think Rockwell was all that bad.
He outright lied to Marty about what the tournament was. The whole thing about kissing the pig and the whole thing about him being set up to fail and the whole thing about this is your path towards participating in the tournament. Because the entire deal is he jumps through all these hoops and he debases himself so that he gets to participate in the tournament, and that is where he will beat Koto.
I mean, the kiss and the pig, yeah, comes out of nowhere, but it didn't feel like, and like how would Rockwell know the rules of like what needed to be done? It was just like Marty was just like so set on I need this money and like forget this money, and he even like goes there because it's not like they've come to an agreement before that he's gonna participate, and then it's like the rug's pulled from under him. It's no, he's like seeing the opportunity to go speak to Ram, and he's like, oh, I've got the money to like pay it off now. Like I'm a changed person, this, that, and the other. And then it's like actually it's a bit too late for you to even like take part in the tournament. But I think Rockwell is kind of portrayed to be like bad guy there, but I don't think he's all the way the bad guy. And I think he has his own like interest of trying to sort of sell whatever products he wants to sell in Japan. He wants the event to be successful, whilst also kind of still getting a little bit won over on Marty by making him like do a few more like humiliating things in the process. But I don't know. It didn't feel like he was like completely outright to get him and screw him over.
I did get the impression that he knew what was going to happen, and he knew that Marty was going to be excluded from the tournament. I can't point to a specific line, but I think there's like a shot where Rockwell's, I think it's something Ram says, and then there's like a shot of Rockwell's reaction. And I did get the sense that Rockwell knew that Marty was set up to fail, and he was using him to get as much publicity and advertising value out of him as possible, and then he was going to discard him. Even things like, I'm not going to fly you back to the US. You're going to have to figure out how to get there on your own. That's also the whole thing. I don't care about you. Once I'm done using you, we're done. I do think that fits together. And it seems to me like he's done, like Rockwell initially starts out knowing nothing about table tennis, but I did get the feeling that by the end he kind of knew what the rules were, and he was carefully leading Marty along so that he would get what he wanted out of Marty and he would still fail. It did not seem like a coincidence to me.
Maybe I missed like the look that he gave after Ram's conversation, but I mean even up until like the night before that they were flying out, and I don't know what alternative they would have had for that event, but he wasn't really planning on like he was kind of like planning without Marty, and then he kind of like Marty shows up at the party after he can't get through to Kay. Once like that whole situation with Kay happened and like she has a meltdown, he kind of seizes the opportunity one more time, and of course at that point like Rockwell's probably thinking, yeah, like I'm going to embarrass you, and you have that scene with like the paddle and stuff like that in the party and whatever. I didn't see it as he 100% knew that he wasn't going to get, but maybe actually someone that comes from like that background, has all that money, has all that knowledge and stuff like that, will probably know that it's probably unrealistic for him to even like take part in the championship, but I'm going to bring him along anyways, just for my self-interest. Because it's funny because he does have that line about guys like me have been around for or whatever. Like what was the line about? Like, because it was kind of like speaking to talent and ownership of talent almost, where he says to Marty just before like the final point or like before he's about to win,
the thing about the vampire.
Yeah. What was it again?
He basically says, I'm 400 years old. There have many people like you, and I've won against all of them. And you're not going to win against me, kind of thing. Essentially saying he has all the resources and all the experience, and Marty is just an impulsive kid who doesn't know what he's doing. That's what that meant, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to a little bit about when you're saying that, or what we're saying about like how someone like him and someone like that has all the knowledge, like you said, didn't know about table tennis, but now does know about table tennis, and someone like him almost immediately becomes like that like mega corporation that kind of covers the sport and kind of sucks up all the profit, and then the talent almost gets like the crumbs, or like gets the small pieces out of it, while someone like him controls everything, and talent comes and goes, but people like him always stay around and stuff like that. Yeah, so I guess he could have known. I don't know.
He just strikes me as the kind of guy who does his homework. And when Marty shows up at the party, he knows that the deadline has passed, and he thinks he can screw over Marty one more time in the most spectacular fashion. And he can still get the value out of like the exhibition match. And after that, it's not his problem. That's kind of at least the vibe. Like, I can't prove it. I can't show the specific line that proves this. It's just kind of the impression I got. Any other things we wanna get into?
Ending. He said that it had one too many endings. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think there's two. The first one is the actual match, right? Where Marty forces everybody to make this a real match and to get his rematch against Koto. And then he actually wins in the end. And like his reaction to it. Like, I don't think there's much in exactly how he wins that's all that interesting. He just plays well. And then he kind of wins, and that's kind of it. But I think the important part is that he makes everybody play fair. And that he does that by appealing to Koto. And there are enough people in the audience who care about fairness that he kind of can embarrass them into giving him that shot. And once he gets a fair chance, he actually delivers. I think that's the character moment here that matters. Like, as I was watching it, I was kind of looking for, okay, like normally the way the hero wins should be a reflection of the character journey and all of that. And I didn't find one, and it seemed a little bit weird that that's so basic and rote, like in terms of just how the match unfolds. And then I realized that it's not about the match, it's about getting to the match. Even how he just conscripts a guy to translate for him to make sure he's not being screwed over, and how he appeals to kind of the sense of fairness of the Japanese people, and all of that, right? Like a country that's like the ashes in Hiroshima are still warm, right? Like at this point, right? They really care about being good hosts and about showing that they can beat the American. And like he doesn't, I think he doesn't outright say it, but he basically has this impression of, I'm giving you a chance to beat an American in a fair match. Are you going to turn that down? And that's when the crowd insists on a fair match. And the businessmen and all the all the grifters that are around who don't care about that are basically shouted down, and they have no choice but to admit it because they don't have a good reason for denying it anymore. I think that is his victory. And then the actual match itself is not that important. And then how he deals with Koto after he's won. Marty, of all people, is a gracious winner. He says to Koto, "You are an amazing player, and I hope you win the real tournament." And that, I think, that is real character growth, and that is real. Like, that's the real Marty. Like, if you just stop trying to screw him over for 5 minutes, he's a halfway decent person. And that is mirrored with how he treats Rachel, for instance, right? Like, as while he thinks she genuinely needs his help, he's not a saint, but he kind of treats her well, and he calls in favors from his rich friends so that she has a place to stay and all of that. And then that ends when he realizes she's been lying to him and she's been faking her black eye and all of that, right? I think Marty is somebody who is desperate for fairness. That is why he likes table tennis so much, because it's fair. That is why he's so upset when people scream over, and that is why he respects Koto. That's why all of this happens. So that's one ending.
Yeah, and I didn't actually think about the angle of like the whole fairness and the victory actually being getting to the match and stuff like that. So that's actually good analysis.
It seems to me like the only fair things in the movie where people are just honest is the two matches against Koto, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Everything else is bullshit.
Yeah, everything is kind of like lying through his teeth the whole time. Like, even when he doesn't 100% need to, he's just kind of lying through his teeth.
No, just everybody. Everybody he deals with is just scamming him, is trying to cheat him out of something that he's owed, or is just an antagonist. And nobody ever plays fair. Like, even the farmer who has the dog is just lying about it. Like, everybody lies, except for when he's playing table tennis.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of speaks to when he requests for someone to stay, and like the person that I think probably owns the table tennis place, like on one night gives him somewhere to stay, but then on another night doesn't have anywhere for him to stay because he's got someone else that is staying. And I don't know whether that's him lying or telling the truth or whatever. I don't know. There isn't a sign that he would, purposely not let him stay. It kind of seems like a man of the community and, giving people something, not one something to do and like kind of like taking care of people in his community. I think that's the only time I think where there's like a bit of fairness and like someone's not trying to screw him over or like there isn't any like, but on the other end there is like Marty that's kind of making up his fables when he's trying to stay over.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not a saint, right? And he's definitely a hustler by himself, right? I'm not saying he's just the victim and everybody else is awful. Like everybody is awful, and Marty is one of them. But I think deep down he desires honesty and fairness, and he only gets that in table tennis, and then later on with Rachel.
So I'm guessing you didn't like the second ending.
Mhm. Right. So here's the thing. Second ending is after he wins the match against Koto, and he somehow, I forget how, but he gets a ride on the military plane. I think we kind of skip that part, but he calls the hospital from Japan, and they tell him that she's in the maternity ward, meaning she's given birth a month early, which in 1952 not a good time, right? And so he gets back to New York as quickly as he can, and he goes to her. And first of all, he goes to her to make sure she's okay, and she is. And then he goes to see his child. And at several points throughout the movie, he has always denied that he's the father or that he could be the father. He has this elaborate stories about how he can't possibly be the father. And then in the end, he says, when the nurse asks him, "Are you family?" He says, "I am the father." And at that point, I still thought he was bullshitting because that's what he needs to say to see the child, right? But it turns out when he sees the child, he's happy. Maybe the only time in the movie where he's genuinely happy. And that's the last shot of the movie. I'm not sure it's a good ending. Maybe I've not thought this through, but it does not appear that him being the father of this child or taking responsibility for his actions is really the end point of his journey. Maybe it is, but it seems like I think even up to that point, it seems to me like he has reasonable doubts about whether or not he's actually the father. It does not seem to me like a case of him running away from his responsibility, just based on what he knows and based on what Rachel has been saying and the degree to which she's been lying in various instances. I think it's reasonable. Like he's definitely could be the father, but he also could not be, right? When he rejects that responsibility, I'm not sure he knows he's the father and he's pretending he's not. It seems more like he could be the father, but he's convinced he isn't. It doesn't seem to be a case of he's refusing responsibility early on when he says he's not the father, and now that he accepts he's the father, he is taking responsibility.
I don't know. I kind of saw it as you said that was like the one moment he was genuinely happy. It was actually for me two moments. It was like one after he beat Koto and he was like in the euphoric
Yes.
state,
Yeah.
and he kind of collapses to the floor, etc. And then shortly after, it's when he sees the child for the first time, and it was almost like it's not preaching to you what's right and what's wrong, and it's not preaching to you whether you can like have both or whatever. But it was like this is someone that was so single minded and had like only one thing on his mind of what he wanted in life, and was table tennis, and he achieved it. And then he saw the child, and I wouldn't say if he was like happy or not. For me, it seemed like it was on the same level, but it was almost like again that euphoric happiness of I'm going to be a father and I've got this child, and this is a new focus that he has in his life, essentially. And again, this is kind of where I say the movie doesn't preach to you what's good and what's bad, because I don't know why for part of it, as he was like getting to the hospital, I kind of thought that she was gonna die, especially because she'd been shot a couple of scenes before. And again, like you said, the baby was coming about a month earlier, and this was like back in the 1950s. The whole time I thought he's gonna go to Japan, he's gonna get his win, but it's gonna come at a cost of the mother of his child and his child, and is gonna have like that level of depression. But the movie doesn't preach that chasing your goals is bad and has the distractions elsewhere. It kind of gives him two wins, and it's like it's almost saying like you can sort of strive for your goals, you can kind of strive for what you want in life, but there still is more to life outside of what you think is the one sole goal that you're like focused on, or the one main thing that you're trying to achieve. There is still like other things that can like add purpose and stuff like that, or whatever. But I don't know. I thought those two kind of worked well with each other in terms of giving him two really high, like really euphoric high moments in his life, especially with how he was throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. I think as we're talking about it, I'm beginning to see it a little bit more, but I'm not sure that family or being a father or sticking with Rachel or taking responsibility for his actions. It does not necessarily seem to be kind of the conclusion of his journey. And that's kind of why I thought that final shot was too much. Like, it seems to me the story ends when he wins the match. And I don't know.
But it's like if you see him throughout, like the amount of like lying and the amount of like hustling he had to do, because again, like all he cared about was ping pong. Like no matter what family said to him, no matter what friends, no matter what like how Rachel and stuff like that. He even said to her like, I'm not going to settle down with you. Like this is not like my life. This is your life. Like I'm not going to settle down with you and give you whatever you think life's going to be, because he was like so single minded about what he wanted, and that was like to be world champion of ping pong. And then it just kind of like shows that there still is more to life. There still is more to sort of like, and again, that's not the conclusion of his story. It doesn't then mean that he doesn't go on to compete in like world championships in future. But it's almost like I know this was what you cared about so much, but you can also care about other things as well. And there's like more things in life than just that. It seems, but I didn't see it as his story ends here, and this is like kind of the conclusion of like everything that we'd been watching in the movie.
But by making it the last shot, that's kind of what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're trying to get at, but at the same time, I don't see it the same way that you do. In terms of like that is the conclusion of like Marty Supreme. I don't know. I just see it as like a massive like juxtaposition to what he was like for the entirety of the movie compared to what actually gave him joy by the end of it.
Definitely like the most selfish guy ever is happy that Rachel is okay and that his child is okay. Like, he's absolutely selfless in that final shot, right?
Yeah, the most selfish person becomes selfless. Yeah.
I can see it on that level. Like, I get that that's going on, right? It's more about, is this tagged on?
I wouldn't say so, because I don't think they introduced it in the movie just to tag on the ending of him smiling at a baby at the end. I don't. Again, for the people working on this, I don't think it's it's just tacked on for the sake of tacking it on. I think there's definitely intention behind having that scene being the final scene and not the ping pong championship.
It's definitely intentional. I'm just trying to interrogate, like, is this the real ending? Is it the other side of the ending, or of the same ending? Is it redundant? Is it just a feel good moment? You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to understand what the purpose of making that the final scene is. It could have been the other way around, right? It could have been that he's preparing for the match and he gets a phone call and the hospital says your child has been born and the mother's fine, and then he wins the match. That could have been the case too, right? So I'm just asking, what is the storytelling function of doing it in that order? Because what comes last seems to be the most important part.
I don't know. I just kind of see it as his two high points.
But it's not like him having a family or having a child is the other thing he's trying to achieve, right? It's not really his goal.
But that's the point of it. But and exactly that's what I'm saying about that's the point of it, is that it was never in his like mindset. It was never in his psyche. He was always about, I just want to play ping pong at the highest level and be the number one at ping pong. It was never about starting a family to a point where you can imagine a scene where he has the child and the child is his and he's like angry because it's about to like ruin his life or whatever like that. And that's the point I'm making. It's like the fact that he was all about ping pong, but then in that particular moment, it's like, actually, I'm going to be a father. And what that then means for him and his journey moving forward is kind of like the point of it, and like the overwhelming joy of that, after it not even being like he couldn't even he couldn't even fathom happiness or like a life of happiness outside of being the best at ping pong. And that's why he was like so determined by it. He didn't even like look to anyone for legitimate like help or support, for the most part in the movie. He was just like trying to like scam his way and like whatever, use people as much as he could throughout the movie.
And also, up until that point, Rachel was kind of an obstacle, right? He helped her because it was a decent thing to do, but it was a problem to solve before he could go back to his real goal. And now that he sees his child and he knows that she's okay, he realizes that that is just as much of an accomplishment, or he's just as happy about it as winning that ping pong game, right? I can see it on that level, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's a trash ending. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it ruins the movie. It's just, as I was watching it, I was like, didn't the movie end 5 minutes ago? Why are we still going? You know what I mean? And I actually think I've changed my mind a little bit. I can definitely see the resonance here, right? Where Rachel turns, first she's a liability, like from his point of view, and then she's an ally because she helps him, and then the thing that makes him happy, or the other thing that makes him happy, is the fruit of having helped her and having cared about her, because she would not be there without his help. So yeah, I definitely see it.
Glad we got there in the end.
Yeah, I was just confused, right? Like I was looking at it saying, would the movie be better if you cut the last 5 minutes? Now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was going to ask a question about would it have been better if it cut off at the ping pong, and I wasn't saying I don't know, but it would have made sense in terms of like the whole like fairness and stuff like that. Yeah, but like you said, it just kind of adds a little bit more having that tacked on the end.
Especially since family was a liability in the beginning, and now it's not. Now it's what you're fighting for. So that is a change, and that is growth.
We got there in the end. We figured it out. Um,
Yeah, we solved it.
anything else we want to touch on?
I think that's it.
Last thoughts.
So this is an unexpectedly great movie. It's just a character-focused story. It reminds me quite a bit about Caught Stealing, which is similar. It's like very morally ambiguous, and it's just focused on putting characters into a situation and seeing how they react. And it doesn't like it does not screw it up. It does not cheapen that in any way. We're just seeing people very flawed, very unnoble people act and try to pursue what they want to pursue and seeing what choices they make. And those are the ingredients for a great story. And I think this is one. We skipped a whole bunch of stuff and minor characters. And I do think this movie is a little bit long. It's a little bit overstuffed. It's a little bit, it could have been trimmed quite a bit and it would still maintain Marty's journey and its themes and its ideas and its the points it wants to make. It just needed a somewhat tighter and more disciplined script. But what we got was still a pretty great movie. So that's a 5 out of 6.
Yeah, hard to disagree. I think very solid movie. I kind of expected, to be fair. Like I said at the top of this, Timothée Chalamet is just one of those actors at the moment where he's just kind of hot in terms of anything you kind of put him in, he's kind of doing. Or I don't think I've seen a movie that he's in where it's not been great. He's just kind of on a roll, doing what he does best, and it's just kind of great to witness. I think movie overall, like I said, very solid, really well acted. I enjoyed sort of all the sort of different shenanigans he ended up in. Kind of didn't talk about some of the more riskier. I wouldn't say jokes. I kind of half laughed at them in the movie just because it was like outlandish, and we had one outtake that didn't make that's not going to make the final cut, but there was definitely some riskier sort of bits at play here. But I think just overall very enjoyable. Glad we watched it. I'm saying so. Yeah, I'd say 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, like 2026 is off to a strong start, right? This is our first review of the year. And there's a lot of franchise nonsense on the lineup. I am glad we started with this one.
And it's an original movie as well. That's not completely bombing at the box office, which is always good to see.
Yeah, it's got a ways to go before making a profit, but just based on its word of mouth and based on its reception. Like, I watched this in a full theater, and that's like Dune and Planet of the Apes territory. Like, usually my theater's pretty empty. One of our hobby horses is people don't turn up for solid original dramas. This is an original drama that people turn out for. Kind of happy about that. And it's also a good movie. Like a lot of the time, audiences will reward like pretty terrible movies. And this is just not. Like, this is just a solid one. So this is like firing on all cylinders. This is doing everything I wanted to do. And it's funny how it's a movie that I did not look forward to and I tried to talk you out of doing because it just looked so boring. It's like a reminder of how like a movie could be anything. Like, this could have been terrible. Like, did you know about the director and kind of the twin movie to this?
No.
So the director to this is Josh Safdie, who I didn't really know before, but he has a brother, and they tend to direct movies together. They split up for this one, and one of them made Marty Supreme, and the other made The Smashing Machine.
I think I did know that actually. I think I did see that. That is hilarious. Because
Still a fairly solid movie, but nothing like this.
yeah, absolutely bombed as well, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, they definitely have some, like, between the two of them, some level of talent. Because the Smash Machine, I didn't love it as much as you did, but it was still a decent enough watch overall, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't love it exactly, but it was a solid movie. And I think that one was just killed by its inflated budget. This has an even higher budget, but this might just get there because the pieces came together better.
Yeah. And with that, I guess we reached the end of another episode. So if you made it this far, we appreciate you rocking with us. We appreciate you pressing play. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then I've got a pic for you to kiss. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast. See you later.
Bye-bye.